Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with my review of the Ifi Audio Supanova power cable. This was loaned to me for review by Ifi Audio, and it currently retails at $349. This is a heavy gauge power cable that also includes active noise canceling circuitry. That would be this part of it right here. It also protects against overvoltage and power surges. And I don't want anyone to confuse this with the Ifi Nova cable that I reviewed just a couple weeks ago. The Nova is exactly like this cable, which is 1.8 meters long or just short of 6 feet. The Nova cable has the exact same cable, the exact same connectors on the end, but the Nova is just a power cable and does not have this unit here, which, like I said, this has active noise canceling and surge protection in it. According to Ifi, they use 5 heavy gauge cables or wires. Let me start over. According to Ifi, they use 5 heavy gauge conductors in this cable. That would be 2 hots, 2 neutrals, and 1 ground that runs down the center. The conductors are made of OFHC copper, which means oxygen-free, high thermal conductivity copper. Let me give you a little bit closer look at this. You can see this has got your common IEC or ICE connector at this end, which will plug into just about virtually any headphone amp. Then you've got a heavy-duty 3-prong connector. The actual gauge of this cable, I don't know. I mean, it looks extremely heavy. Might look heavier than it is. It's a huge cable. It's fairly stiff, but it does bend enough that you can get it hooked up to your equipment. You're probably not going to have a need to hook this up to something real small or light. Usually those units use an external power supply, so usually any headphone amp or DAC or whatever that uses this type of connection where you connect 120 directly to it's going to probably have enough weight that the cable isn't going to be an issue moving it around. I did want to explain the difference of this cable having active noise canceling and most power conditioners. Most of them use what would be called passive power conditioning, which basically just filters the power and filters out any noise or interference in it, like radio frequency sounds, things like that. Well, the difference with active noise canceling is it actually measures the noise and then creates a equal but opposite or out of phase signal to cancel it out. It works very similar to the way noise canceling headphones work. So anyway, before I talk about how I tested this and the results, I did want to point out that the build quality seems to be extremely good with this. It's a very nice looking cable, and if nothing else, it's just going to look impressive in your system. If you have it out where someone can see it, it is very cool looking in my opinion. So anyway, the ideal way to test something like this would be to have 2 identical systems hooked up at the same time, and one system using this cable, another system using another cable, which would require 2 identical headphone amps in my case, or speaker amps, whatever you're using. But you would pretty much have to have 2 identical amps, one hooked up with this cable, another hooked up to whatever cable you're comparing it to, and then 2 identical sets of headphones or speakers or whatever, and a way you could switch back and forth almost immediately without any delay. Well, unfortunately, I don't have 2 identical headphone amps or 2 identical pairs of headphones. So the best I can do is try another cable, turn the amp off, plug this in, turn the amp back on, and try it. So there's a significant delay, which takes away the possibility, or it makes it a lot harder to hear subtle little differences. So basically the way I tested this is I used 3 different headphone amps that I currently have here. One would be the Felix Audio Echo, which is an OTL type of tube amp. The Waveborn Edelweiss 3, which is also an OTL type tube amp. And the Audio GD Master 9, which is my reference solid state amp. And for the comparison, I just compared this to the normal standard 18 gauge power cable that comes with just about every headphone amp or DAC sold right now. To test it, I used 2 different headphones. The first is the Sony MDR V700. I didn't use that to test the sound quality. What I did is I used that to test the background noise. That headphone is, I've had it for years. It's extremely efficient, more so than most IEMs. And if there's any background noise in an amp, I will hear it with those headphones. So that's how I always test amps and DACs and things that I review for background noise, is by using that headphone. It's, like I said, it's more sensitive than most IEMs. And then for sound quality, to see if I actually hear a difference listening to music, I use the Hi-Fi Man Aria, and that would be the version 3, the new stealth version. So the first test I did was with the Felix Audio Echo, and I tried it with the standard power cable. And if I paused my source, which is my CD player, and with the Sony headphones hooked up, I had to turn the volume up to about 11 o'clock before I started hearing any background noise at all. Just, that slight hiss you hear in the background. Well, like I said, with the Sony headphones, I was about 11 o'clock before I heard any hiss. So I switched over to the Ifi cable, and it did make a little bit of a difference. I was now at about 12 o'clock on the volume knob before I started hearing any background hiss. Okay, so then I switched over to the Waveborn Edelweiss 3 headphone amp and did the same thing, repeated the same experiment, hooked up the standard 18 gauge cable. And with the Sony headphones, it was about the same thing. I was at about 11 o'clock on the volume knob before I started hearing any hiss. I switched over to this cable, and now I was at about 12 o'clock on the volume knob before I heard any hiss. Then I switched over to the Audio GD Master 9, and I did want to mention that for all of these tests, I was using the quietest DAC that I have to make sure that the background noise was coming from the amp and not the DAC. I was using the Topping D70S MQA DAC, and that was my source to all 3 of these amps, and that has a signal to noise ratio of, I believe, 127 decibels from the balanced outputs, which I could not use with the 2 tube amps. Those are single-ended, so I believe the signal to noise ratio is 124 decibels from the single-ended outputs, but it's 127 from the balance, which is what I ran into the Audio GD Master 9. So anyway, with the Master 9, same Sony headphones on high gain, which I would never even use high gain with a sensitive headphone like that, but for this test or experiment, I did. So I put the amp on high gain, and I was at about 50 on the volume knob, which that is a stepped volume with 100 steps. So I was at 50 before I started hearing any background hiss, which is about halfway up on the volume knob. So once again, I switched over to this cable, and once again, it did make a small difference. It bumped the background noise up to about 60 on the volume knob before I started hearing anything. So there is a difference. It does cut the background noise a little bit. I do want to mention, though, that I have probably exceptionally clean power where I live. I live out in actually in the middle of a national forest, and there are no other houses nearby, and I have my own private transformer stepping down from line voltage to 240, and then I have a dedicated circuit running from my circuit box to my audio rack where all my headphone equipment is. So that's on a dedicated 20 amp circuit. So my power is pretty clean. I really have not found a need for power conditioning, but I do appreciate having protection against power surges, which this does do. So it does make a little bit of difference as far as the background noise on these amps, but either way, with or without this, that background noise is still at a volume level that I would never use even that headphone, the Sony, the very efficient one. So is it going to make a difference, at normal listening levels? It might with a very sensitive IEM or a very sensitive headphone, where this might bump the background noise high enough, or I should say low enough, that you don't hear it with your sensitive IEM or very sensitive headphone. Okay, I repeated the test with the Hi-Fi Manoria, once again the stealth version, but not to listen to background noise, but to listen to the music and see if I hear a difference. Okay, I did want to point out that with the Aria, for example, with the Master 9, I'm normal listening with that would have the gain at about, or the volume at about 30, where with the Aria, I can't hear any background noise with either cable until about 70 on the volume knob. So my normal listening is nowhere near the noise level, so the noise level has no effect on a harder to drive headphone like the Aria. Also with the Aria, when I was using it with the Echo or the Edelweiss amp, with either of those amps, with the Aria, I can turn the volume up all the way with my source paused and hear no background noise at all. So there's nothing to get rid of as far as the Aria is concerned, because it's a harder to drive headphone. So does it make a difference? I don't know. It sounds great either way. I'm not saying there isn't a difference. There may be a difference in frequencies higher than what I'm hearing. I know that I can't hear anything above 15,000 hertz. So is it filtering out some noise above that? I don't know. I can't answer that question. Does it make a difference I can hear? No, it doesn't really make a noticeable difference where I can tell the difference in the cable listening with the Hi-Fi Manoria. I'm not saying there isn't a difference, I just don't hear it. If it's there, it's subtle enough that I'm not hearing it jumping back and forth. Maybe if I had two identical systems side by side and I could switch back and forth immediately, maybe, I don't know. So, bottom line, does a cable really make a difference? As far as the noise level of the amp, it does lower the noise level slightly. So if you're using an extremely efficient headphone or IEM, it may bump the noise level out of your audible range. It may make a difference. Using a harder to drive headphone, I didn't personally hear a difference, but like I said, I'm not saying it's not there, I just didn't hear it. So, yeah, it's a great cable. It looks very cool. It is claimed to offer surge protection. You know, should be heavy enough that you could use with pretty much any speaker amp. You know, I'm only using it with a headphone amp, so I don't require this heavy of gauge, but with a speaker amp you might. Is it worth the price? I don't know. You know, in my case, I would say no. I've got pretty clean power. I don't really need the power filtering. I'm using headphones that are harder to drive. So the noise level of the amp is not an issue, but for the right person, yeah, it might be just what you need. So I'll leave that decision up to you. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up now. Once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video has helped you, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you are all welcome to join us at the Headphone Experience on Facebook. We are up to 13.8 thousand members, and we keep growing. I think about 15 members per day. So I'd like to see you over there. And once again, thanks for watching my video.